7 Days to Sunny June Book 2 by Blue Bastard. Friday p.m. And then you drop the bomb. Chapter 10. Twilight, are you sure about this? Totally, confirmed the Alicorn, determined to look on her face, her horn aglow. She's surrounded by a spear of magical energy with arcane runes, forming lines along every which way. I'm modifying this one myself with what I know dark magic, so feel free to put a little more punch into your attack than before. Raspberry just watched the spinning runes go back and forth. There was something wrong with them. She knew, but she couldn't put a hoof on it. Though, if Twilight was using more conventional magic, Raz considered she may not just recognize Twilight's spell. After she finally given up on trying to use ordinary unicorn magic years ago, she never bothered to really read up on normal magic. Only Miller felt depressed, and in a way, inferior, to accomplished magical prodigies like Twilight. Hey, you okay, Raz? Called back the Castellia pony. Something wrong? Huh? Oh, no, sorry about that. Just lost in my own thoughts for a moment. Gotcha. But I'd rather not keep the spell up forever, you know. Let me solve that problem for you. Immediately, Raspberry lit up her horn. A thick cloud of purple, bubbly mass boiling on her forehead was ready to be unleashed. She reared, drawing her head back, and then upon landing, fired a bolt of raw, dark magic. Despite Twilight's boastfulness, Raspberry intentionally made this attack weaker than the earlier ones. This makes sure that protective bubble could actually stop dark magic at all. The result, however, was alarmingly different than expected. Even if the shield had done absolutely nothing, Raspberry's attack would have done nothing other than turn Twilight and Ugly Shield green. Instead, the spell shattered the shield on contact, before somehow both shield and spell fragments converged into a single point of mass in front of Twilight and exploded again, sending Twilight spiraling backwards. Twilight! Called out Raz, immediately teleporting to the down Alicorn's side. Thankfully, whatever had happened, the immediate afterward showed Twilight wasn't hurt too badly. Just a bruise here or there. The adverse reaction for the spells, both offensive and defensive, did not go unconscious, however. And there was no telling, "No!" screamed somebody from a distance. Raspberry barely had any time to react before Sunset Shimmer suddenly appeared next to her, delivering a huff into Raspberry's face. Stay the hell away from her, you monster! Oh, great. The one pony I don't need involved, thought Raspberry as he hit the ground. I'm too late. A still-shocked Sunset Shimmer looked at the still, lifeless body of Twilight Sparkle. Taking in trembling breaths, Sunset's thoughts were flooded of images of the bloody, mangled human with Twilight's hair. If she wanted me to be friends with this monster, how could she have been so blind? Suddenly, the truth about what was really going on hit Sunset like a ton of bricks. She thought about what she read in that article, and about what Raspberry told her. Rarity had told her. It all started when Raspberry Barrel was caught and forced to stand trial. After her outburst at Set Clearing, Raspberry had come up with some sob story about her dark and troubled past. She had Twilight and the others wrapped around her hoof after that. The princess must have just now discovered the truth, forcing Raspberry to silence her once and for all. Hearing a grunt, Sunset looked over to see her dark counterpart struggling to stand. Sunset lowered her horn and began challenging magic. Don't bother getting up. Back at her post, Raspberry hurled. What, you don't want me to help her? You've done enough already! Look, just calm down. I'm sure that— No! A blast of magic rocketed forth on Sunset, and Raspberry barely managed to raise a wall of dark crystal to block it. Even still, the wall only held up so much without reinforcement, and Raspberry darted from behind it before it shattered under Sunset's relentless force. However, Sunset had to recover from using so much power at once. A brief respite that Raspberry took full advantage of. Okay, fine then. The horn was encased in its dark aura, as if Raspberry was suddenly released a concentration of pure shadow, and it immediately sought out Sunset like a snake looking for its next meal. Sunset could only brace for impact, blinking confusing when the shadow mass just passed right on through her and dissolved. What was that supposed to do? Dived Sunset, wondering if Raspberry was toying with her. It became evident that was not the case when it attempted to cast another offensive spell. She found the energy suddenly reflect back as if hitting a blockage. It's causing a sharp spike of pain in her head. Quickly darting a hoof up to her strangely malfunctioning horn, she gasped sharply as she discovered strange spikes of something having grown on them. In case you haven't noticed, snarked Raspberry, looking all too confident, I cut off your magic. It's not permanent unless I want it to be. Is this some kind of joke? See, Sunset, if you could cut off a unicorn's magic so easily, why didn't you do that to Twilight? Raspberry faced off. If you just let me speak, I can explain this to you. Oh, I get now. You don't think I'm not as much of a threat as Twilight, do you? But why would I think that? You're the one who's been harassing me all week. Because you're the one attacking my sister's mind! Sunset roared, looking at her eyes, pinpricks of rage. She gestured to the left form of Twilight. It's pretty clear now what you do to ponies that dare oppose you! Right in retort, Raspberry chose to sigh deeply, close her eyes. If she thinks I'm down and out, that's a big mistake. Sunset thought. Her horn incapacitated, Sunset let it go for more physical assault. She couldn't help but feel satisfaction when Raspberry opened her eyes and see Sunset's hoof connect to her face. Why don't more unicorns do that in these type of fix like Sunset? Sometimes I wonder. Warlock staggered back, blood trickling from her displaced nuzzle. Lining herself up for the lump she landed in, Raspberry wiped the blood from her face, slitted eyes angrily boring into Sunset. You just don't know when to stop, do you? Accused the darker unicorn. You know Twilight was wrong with you. You haven't changed one bit. Don't lecture me, you Sabra-born bitch! Said Sunset. You're the one who used dark magic and manipulation to become a princess. It's only fitting that you're just my twisted mirror image. You're everything I aspired to be, but not anymore. Now I will protect my friends and my family from you! Seeing an opportunity, Sunset took a deep breath and gave Raspberry the deadliest scare she could muster. Your ass is going to be Discord, and I'm going to be all 6 fucking elements of harmony! I'm going to rampage on you like the princess did against the Minotaur invasion of 957! I will break you like she broke the entire Taisley army at Saddleback Ridge, and I won't feel an ounce of remorse doing it! Do I make myself clear? God, I love doing that rant. What the fuck are you talking about? Barked Raspberry. Sunset just stood there, taking a few moments to mentally reboot. I'm in the actual country where all that shit actually happened, and I still waste that balls of pre-ass kicking space! She groaned. Raspberry just stared at her opponent with an uncomprehending expression. What the fuck is wrong with you? You are! Without letting Raspberry even think about finishing her off, Sunset rushed forward to try a more direct method of assault. Following her white lie about knowing martial arts to explain to her family just why she'd been able to do otherwise superhuman feats, like punch restaurant tables into oblivion and beat the snot out of her ex-boyfriend in seconds, she'd taken some pointers from Applejack on learning Taekwondo. Now deprived of her magic, Sunset knew this was the only means of fighting the monster she had left. However, trying to actually apply what she little knew into attacking Raspberry was relatively awkward given Taekwondo was not designed for quadruple stances, much less sapient equine body forms. Thus, her attacks ultimately amounted to awkwardly flailing around in a manner that looked quite ridiculous. She still managed to get some good kicks and almost landed an axe kick without too much strain. Raspberry must have been completely flabbergasted, as he made no real effort to go on the offensive. But she did seem to have unnaturally good reflexes, managed to either dodge or shrug off anything that wasn't more a glancing blow. This isn't working, Sunset realized. I need to do something to turn the tide before she decides to stop messing around and finish me off with another dark spell. And then Sunset caught the sight of the brace on Raspberry's hind leg. A glimmer of hope appeared. It was a sign that her opponent could take permanent damage after all. More importantly, it was a good weak point for her to exploit. And if there's anything I was ever good at, exploiting others' weaknesses. Sunset reared up on her hind legs, raising her left foot in a feint. Raspberry fell for it. She did her position to protect herself from the attack, exposing her injured hind leg in the process. Brandon followed through her projected attack. Sunset spun around and nailed Raspberry's braced leg with the hardest bug she could muster. With an agonized scream, Raspberry fell to her side, clutching the broken appendage as her eyes rolled back in pain. Sunset couldn't help but grin now her victory was all but assured. Not so invulnerable, are you? The smug grin on her face quickly faded, however, when she looked back at Raspberry. Despite the small stream of tears coming from her eyes, the wisps of dark magic energy starting to flow around Raspberry didn't bode well. Indeed, it was a shout now passed over the injured mare, her color shifting to darker tones, including her cutie mark as well. That made it worse, given the intrinsic link between the pony and her cutie mark. To see it change like that was nothing short of unnatural. Sunset's attention, however, was quickly deferred to the other alarming feature, the one that had been the recency and convinced Raspberry was the cause of all Twilight's problems. Her real horn. As the fake, normal-looking horn faded away, in its place emerged a fully curved, smooth-faced, magical conductor that struck fear into Sunset. All around them, the very world itself seemed to glow darker as Raspberry's agonized cries continued. Indeed, a glance up confirmed that an unnatural vortex of dark clouds now swirled above them. When Raspberry climbed back to her host, Sunset was looking at a completely different pony. She was looking at the monster from her nightmare. Now Sunset finally began to understand she totally underestimated what she was up against. Wailed the monster. It was loud, an unnatural sound, like the cry of a wraith. It shook Sunset to her very core of her being. The monster's eyes, was caught Sunset for only a brief moment in her normal blood red coloration, poured with the purple-green mist. Her fangs bared, almost as to mock Sunset. Bell's first course of action was now to charge her assailant with a ball-of-body slam. Oof! Sunset was knocked back a few meters, the erased unicorn opposite her having come in like a wrecking ball to her chest. Already gasping for breath, Sunset's eyes went wide when she saw Raspberry charging up for another spell. The simple thing would have been to teleport away to recover, but as the pain in her head magnified the attempt, she only then remembered her horn was prevented from working. She was trapped. As underlying that fact, Raspberry sought several bolts of magic at Sunset, who found herself encased in dark crystal from the neck down, pinned against a nearby tree. As Sunset struggled to escape, she realized there was one part of her body still exposed, the part of her chest where her heart was located. Sunset's worst fears were confirmed when she looked up from the hole to see Raspberry charging at her. The frightening horn aimed like a dart, heading right for the bullseye, its piercing tip casting a gleam for a split second. Her almost limp hind leg with the brace dragged sickeningly behind her, yet it had no effect on the mad unicorn's speed. Time seemed to slow down as the demon unicorn closed the distance between them. Sunset found herself thinking with despair about all she would leave behind. Her human friends would all be heartbroken when she didn't return. Principal Celestia would have to tell her family everything. What would they think? Would her parents ever forgive her deception? Would Shining Armor, Tivy, Twilight think of her differently? Oh God, Twilight. If the nightmares don't kill her, this will. Sorry. Twilight, forgive me! Despite Sunset, tears started to flow. Something happened in that moment that Sunset couldn't explain. Raspberry's eyes went wide for a second, and suddenly they didn't seem as monstrous as before. Then, abruptly, she left her three good legs at an angle, kicking out grass and soil while she slid to a stop just in front of the uncased Sunset. The oppressive darkness of the clouds above them slowly lifted. For a moment, the two lookalikes made eye contact. During what Sunset saw a flicker of something in Raspberry's eyes. It almost looked like sympathy, understanding. However, both mares suddenly felt another force take them, and promptly fell unconscious. Oh no! Gasped Fluttershy. She arrived during the brief battle when Heliodor, who Raspberry had allowed to pet sit for a day, suddenly taken off without warning in a clear panic. Fluttershy understood the source of it as soon as she looked where the bird was flying, saw a swirling vortex of dark clouds. It was now the sign of a sleeping companion, had nestled against her to make sure she knew he was there. Fluttershy herself was by Twilight's side, helping the dazed Alicorn get back to her host. Don't worry. assured the princess. It's only a sleeping spell. I'll apologize to them later. It's the only way to make sure they can't hurt each other right now. Fluttershy gave Twilight a pat and worried look. But, Twilight, they're not simply going to be nice to each other once they wake up, are they? Most likely not. But something happened with Raz that allowed her to control herself. And I have a small theory to why it is. But clearly, we need to get those two ponies talking about what's going on here, especially Sunset. Twilight closed her eyes. I've so seen this before. It's a failure of my position as the Princess of Friendship that this had come to pass. No, my dear Twilight, said a voice behind her. If anything, this proves that you are the only pony who deserves that title. Twilight turned around and her eyes widened at the pony standing there. Princess Celestia? Where are you? I was having lunch with Princess Cadance when she felt a surge of somber level dark magic being used. Since we only knew one pony capable of such a feat, and said mare was in the crosshairs of my wayward student, I felt the need to step in. Celestia glanced over the two mares in question. Though, it looks like you have things under control for the time being. Right. So I turned to address her friend. Fluttershy, do you think you could take Raspberry back to the retreat? Fluttershy nodded and went over to the mare in question to wake her. Twilight's gaze fell on the one who started this incident. Simmer laid on the grass where she had landed when Raspberry's dark crystals had dissipated. Twilight knew her once enemy had only acted out of love for her family, but she couldn't deny the situation looked bad. Sunset had triggered another dark power surge of Raspberry, and it was through sheer luck that no pony was hurt. Twilight swallowed when she looked back at Celestia. So, what about Sunset? Celestia's gaze briefly flicked to her former protege. Take her back to Golden Oaks. Keep her there until we decide how to proceed. There are ponies she should talk to. Ones that, in hindsight, we should have had her speak with after she first explained why she was here. When she woke up, Sunset was wondering if she knew life without some kind of perpetual headache again, raising a shaky hoof to the top of her head. She got further surprised when she pressed her horn. It was free of whatever Raspberry had put on it, despite her claim she could only remove the blockage. But that was a small blessing to the world of shit she knew that awaited her. The bed she was in wasn't the one she had been spending the previous few nights after whatever crazy event had occurred that day. And this wasn't Chukwu Corner. It was Golden Oaks. Never before did Sunset think coming back to such a familiar name would be bad. Above all else, what had actually happened? Sunset was certain she managed to sign her own death warrant with that rash, hasty action. But the fact she wasn't dead meant nothing to her. Is Twilight okay? Is she eaten alive? Sunset fretted, getting out of bed, still felt the lingering effects of getting headbutted in her barrel. No more running around for her tonight. Magic use was also most likely out of the question, both from the pains in her chest and her head. Of course, things just had to get worse once he accidentally overshot a step while trying to go down the staircase, causing her promptly turn into a rolling red and colored ball all the way to the floor where she landed with a red thump. Yeah, I keep telling Twilight we need a railing for the stairs. So one of the few male voices Sunset had heard all week. But now that she can fly, she doesn't need stairs, but it's less rails. The mare simply groaned in pain before regaining her senses. Beside Twilight's number one assistant, sitting at the table, casually reading a newspaper, helped to put Sunset's fears at ease. If Twilight was dead or seriously injured, she was sure the baby dragon would be a little more concerned. I take it Twilight's fine then? Spike closed the newspaper he was reading and looked in Sunset's direction. Better than you, at least, he told her, a satisfied grin coming to his face. But then again, you're the only one Raspberry beat up. A flicker of anger came to Sunset's face. Well, not the only one. Spike blinked confused and asked, Are you talking about how she accidentally knocked out Twilight right before you charged her like an angry Minotaur? Now, back on her host, Sunset glowered at Spike. How could he, of all people, ignore the obvious? Accidentally? She threw an exploding beam of energy at Twilight! No, she did. All she did was throw a minor hex that would recolor Twilight's coat. What happened was Twilight's fault by complete accident. Huh? Spike rolled his eyes.
Here's the deal, at least what Twilight said at any rate. Z and Raz were testing out a bunch of anti-dark magic spells that Twilight found, with one of them being modified by Twilight herself. Only she got some of the spell's composition wrong, so instead of having the intended effect of dampening the dark magic's effect, it amplified the power. She asked Raspberry to use a strong spell out of ill-placed confidence, but it was Raz who used a relatively weak spell because he didn't trust Twilight's defenses.
The unicorn was struck dumb. Understanding the entire situation turned on its head. Huh? Spike lowered his brow and gave Sunset Simmer a deadly glare. Once he remembered seeing out much more canine features.
Let me put it simply. You assaulted a member of Equestrian royalty for no reason, and potentially endangered all of Ponyville in the process.
Sunset sat in place, suddenly feeling like she was tumbling down the stairs all over again. Celestia's parting words on her first date back echoed in Sunset's mind. I know you're worried about Twilight, Sunset. Celestia had warned her. Strongly advise any more violent outbursts during your stay here. I'm screwed, Sunset said, barely in a whisper. When Celestia finds out.
She already knows.
When Sunset looked back up at Spike, it was with a look of pure terror.
See, apparently arrived just after you passed out, in order for you to be sent back here. You're pretty much under house arrest until she and Twilight figure out what to do with you. So don't go anywhere.
As Sunset sat there in chilled silence, Spike continued.
Hey, what do you know about my counterpart in that other world? Is he a dog too?
Sunset forced herself to focus, but she really didn't care to indulge Spike. It started as a brief distraction. Oh, yes, the human world does have a version of you, but...
Spike narrowed his eyes. But what?
Sunset merely blushed. He's not a dog. He's a human just like the others. More specifically, he's the little brother to Twilight. So therefore, since Twilight's my foster sister, the other version of you is my foster brother. The bear's crits followed on Sunset's muzzle. Spike didn't change his questioning glare.
So, the other version of me is a human, like what Twilight turned into, and not a dog like what I turned into?
Yeah, just a normal kid. A pause. Well, mostly. Well, Spike. Sigh. Spike got up from his feet. I'll be right back, he said critically before proceeding to head on upstairs. Sunset didn't understand what was going on until a distraught cry rang from the upper floor. No! This was in turn followed by the baby dragon, coming back down the stairs with the exact same unamused expression on his face. However, it was clear he had something else to say. Sunset knew exactly what it was. Anything else, Spike?
Yeah, getting to it. Twilight told me I had to apologize to you for what I did earlier that week.
Sunset, she eyed him carefully. Are you really sorry?
Only insofar as that Twilight took away my gem stats and my comic books.
The fiery-haired mare rolled her eyes. Well, at least he doesn't have a 3DS to compensate, or else he'd probably start doing worse things to me. Fine. Apology accepted. Since that's probably the best I'm going to get out of you.
Good. Just tell Twilight I was really sorry, okay? Or else he says he won't give me my allowance to buy the new PowerPoint issue that comes out next week.
Don't push your luck, Sunset nickered.
Fine, I get the message. Now that I've taken care of that, we can move on.
Move on to what? Spike gave her another hard look.
You need to stop harassing Raspberry Barrel.
Sunset gave a weary sigh. She was getting sick to death of talking about that point. Don't tell me she got to you too.
I don't know what you mean by that, but Raz isn't a bad pony. The only time she's ever been hostile to any pony is that they were hostile to her first. Though I guess you know all about that.
Sunset gave Drake a skeptical look. What about when she fed you that dark crystal? Was that in response to some hostility from you?
So, she tried to kill you for no reason then?
No, just... Spike sighed and rubbed the space between his eyes with his claw.
Look, the whole thing was an accident, just... okay?
Yeah, the article I read said the same thing, Sunset said with intensive man. Guess it pays to have a princess under your control.
Look, here's what happened. You know that Raspberry used to make gem forgeries out of dark crystals for a living, right?
Sunset nodded.
Well, she made a particularly big, juicy-looking one for Sleep Bell's Nightmare Night costume. Problem is, it ended up in my reach.
Spike gave a lamenting sigh.
It was my fault, really. I knew I wasn't supposed to eat the gem, but I was thinking with my stomach that night. Anyway, the fairy magic in my fluids that allows me to eat gems in the first place somehow caused the disguised crystal to grow inside my throat. So I had been so quick to use the Heimlich, I would be standing here. The raspberry was horrified. Sunset raised an eyebrow. Really? Yeah, once her secret was out, Raspberry ran off. Doesn't that disprove her guilt? Sunset asked. The innocent don't run. I know that all too well. Not unless they know they're going to be locked up, brought to death beyond something beyond their control. Spike answered. You do know she only uses dark magic because she can't use regular magic, right? Now both eyebrows made their way to Sunset's forehead. Used to me. Anyway, she only ran after she knew I was okay, Spike continued. Heck, running when she did ended up putting her persistent to save Apple Bloom from a terrible fate. She saved that filly? Sunset didn't know what to think. Everything she thought she knew about her supposed enemy was suddenly being turned on its head. Why hasn't anybody told me that? All I've been hearing is that there's this big event every pony was involved with that featured her, but no pony will tell me what it was. You will learn that in time, Miss Simma, came a third voice, both feminine and regal. As the unicorn and dragon looked to the stairs, Princess Luna was standing atop them. But this is not Spike's position to inform you of that, nor is it mine. Princess Luna, Bird Sunset, immediately bowing. What are you doing here? My sister feels that in that today's incident, you and I needed to talk. Frankly, from what I know about you, I do agree with her that such a conversation is long overdue. A few minutes later, Sunset and Princess Luna were outside, atop the elevated deck at Golden Oaks, gazing up at the starry skies. A tea set was laid out before them, courtesy of Spike's usual ministrations. Luna had briefly teased him about being around for girl talk, before giving the baby dragon some gems, sending him on his way. Seeing the princess do that, it made Sunset wonder if Miss Luna had ever done anything similar for Spike when he entered the picture. It seemed like something she would do. Tell me, Miss Simma, began Luna, a teacup flowing before her lips. Are there nights like these in the human world? Sunset looked up to gaze at Luna's handiwork. The night sky was covered in a blanket of shimmering stars, each vying for her attention. The saves of ponies, the Ursas and dragons looked down at her from every corner of the dark expanse. And every time Sunset thought she had seen them all, she spotted new shapes she failed to notice before. Even when studying under Celestia's wing, the night sky had never looked so beautiful. Of course, that could be because he hadn't been tended by his proper master. Probably. One would need to be atop either Mount Shasta or Mount Lassen, at least where I live. Elsewhere, you generally have to be somewhere far from an equally commercialized area. Replied Sunset. My world's a bit more densely populated than Equestria. Although Sunset's slip-up was barely noticeable, Luna caught it immediately. Your world? Does Equestria no longer bear that title? That thought had lingered over Sunset's thoughts, like a dark cloud in the back of her mind. The more she thought about the past week, the more she realized she was a stranger in what became once her home. Despite how accommodating Twilight and the others tried to be, she was still treated like an outsider. She was an anomaly at best, and a criminal at worst. The realization drew a dismayed sigh from Sunset. I guess not. Luna gave a sympathetic smile. Yet here you stand. That you have returned even after all that has transpired is proof enough that you'll always be a part of this world. Sunset returned Luna's smile with her own, but her heart wasn't in it. With all due respect, Princess, you know why I came back. Luna nodded. Yes, this brings me to why I'm here now. Luna stood in place to study Sunset for a moment. When you stepped through that mirror 5 days ago, what was your plan? Sunset opened her mouth to answer, but only realized she couldn't. She got to a stop whatever was causing Twilight's nightmares, but that wasn't a plan. That was the objective. When Sunset didn't answer, Luna did for her. You didn't have one, did you? You just walked back into Equestria expecting to find some evil monster plotting to destroy your family. Luna then gave Sunset an impish grin. I thought my sister's pupils were supposed to be smart. Sunset was unable to hold back an immediate glare. I did find a monster plotting against my family. It calls itself Raspberry Barrel. Except, says it wasn't so sure anymore. The more she hunted for evidence of the warlock's guilt, the more she found the opposite. Remember when we first met at the start of the week? I said that you and I were not so different, Luna said, setting down her teacup. Let me tell you the tale of another monster, one called itself Nightmare Moon. Tilting her head, Sensei gave Luna a quizzical look. She knew the tale of Nightmare Moon just like any other pony in Equestria, and now knew there was a great deal of truth to the myth. But Sensei did not know where Luna was going with this. The tale may be familiar. Nightmare Moon was a monster born of jealousy and spite. The princess that birthed that abomination believed she was entitled to more than what she had. She believed that Princess Celestia was holding her back, and so betrayed her. Wounded in her deepest, most personal way imaginable, it was some time before that pony was shown the error of her ways. And when she finally did, she made it her goal to better herself, so she may never fail prey to such vain temptations again. Seems like I've been hearing that story a lot these days, Sensei commented. There's another aspect to the story that others do not tell, Luna continued. The truth is, Nightmare Moon was born of fear as much as she was born of vain ambition. Fear of what? Luna leaned closer. Of not being loved. Indeed, it was that mere fear of losing her sister's love, thus to see her subjects, that brought her to such madness, and that drew the nightmare forces to her. Ultimately, it was that pony's fear that led to her downfall. Slight gust of chill to sunset brought the teacher a lucid attempt to combat it, but the drink was already losing its warmth. That's a cool story and all, but I don't see how it applies to what we were talking about. Is that not what drives you, Sunset Shimmer? Fear of losing your sister's love? In a way, Luna was right. What the princess was trying to say then dawned on Sunset with sudden clarity. She thought back to some of her actions over the past week. Those moments where she let her old side slip out, all because she was afraid of losing Twilight. Like seeing the sun change in Sunset's expression, Luna smiled. Ah, now you understand. If you let your fear control you, it does become another monster. Sensei gave a single nod. I never thought about it like that. Sometimes it helps to have an outsider's opinion, does it not? When I leaned in closer, gave Sensei a conspiratory grin. Of course, it also helps to talk to someone who was once of the same mind. What do you mean? Someone who at one point or another believed that Celestia was the biggest, gaudiest, most uncouth butt in all of Equestria! Sensei snorted. Before she knew it, she was laughing alongside Princess Luna. The pair sat in a comfortable silence for some time afterward. During which time, Sunset thought long and hard about a great many things, namely about what was going to happen the next day. As she finished her tea, Luna looked over at Sunset. Do you have a plan now? Well, I can't do much while I'm under house arrest, but I think I do. There's only one thing Sunset could do right now. I've been right in front of her all along. It was only now she finally acknowledged it. I'm going to talk to Raspberry. I'm going to apologize for attacking her, and then, if she's up to forgiving me, I'm going to work together with her to solve this mystery once and for all. My princess gave an approving smile. Spoken like one of my sister's pupils. When Sunset Sarah called to the guest bed at Golden Oaks that night, she found herself surprisingly calm. Sir Artisari was still out on whether Celestia intended to punish her for the assault, along with everything else he'd done. But her dreams were not plagued by nightmares that night. For the first time that week, Sunset went to bed knowing exactly what she had to do.